Recording in progress.
I recognize your voice. I just wanted to.
I think Gunala is here.
Hi, Gunala.
Yeah.
We can't see you though.
Yeah.
Just give it a minute.
No, what's happening is the
Maybe she's not
one of the
listening
remote
us.
speakers is actually the workshop organizer. We'll introduce the topic. So I'll start by saying, Debarati Das is going to speak, and then she will do the intros, context. Then I'll be asking the questions of the panelists who are all online. So I wanted to ask you, because I thought I would be checking the online, the chat and so forth. I saw that you're doing that, are you?
If you're
For
already in there,
questions?
you're more comfortable, please go ahead and do that. But if
Yeah.
you would like me to, of course.
Okay.
So
Oh,
it's up to you, whatever works with you.
okay. I'm sort of geared up to do it, so that should be
And I'll let you drive then.
that should be fine. Okay, fantastic. Well, we should get started, I think. Yeah.
Are we audible on site? I'm not sure if people on site can hear us.
I believe Gunala is not listening us. Debarati,
Yeah.
can you text her?
I have messaged the secretariat.
And also write that
So,
Gunala.
good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session on disability and digital self-determination. What's the missing link? And I think this should be quite an exciting session. It's we hear about disability accessibility, but this is looking at it in a much broader sense. And I will be moderating this. I'm Gunala Asprink, but the workshop organizer is Debarati Das, who will give the introductions and the context, and then I will be moderating the remote speakers and people here in the room. So I'm looking forward to this exciting session, and I will hand now over to Debarati Das. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gunala. Just wanted to check if we are audible on site.
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, hello everybody. I'm Debarati from Point of View India, and we welcome you to our session, Disability and Digital Self-Determination, What's the Missing Link? So to give you some context, earlier this year, we hosted a series of 4 studios that unpacked several questions on what self-determination can look like in digital spaces for persons with disabilities. And in these studios with persons with disabilities, technologists, and policy experts, we unpack the question of accessibility and beyond. Who are we as digital beings? How do we reimagine human autonomy and agency in the age of growing digital footprints? And how can people with disabilities and communities have more autonomy in cyberspace when today our data is an extension of ourselves? In today's panel discussion, we will further explore and reimagine digital accessibility for persons with disabilities to also include agency, autonomy, choice, freedom, and rights. Before I introduce our speakers, a couple of housekeeping tips. Our online participants, you can use chat to ask your questions and to share your thoughts. And we also have a Q&A session for the last segment, which is when we'll take questions and reflections, both online and on site. Also, closed captions are enabled, so you can use them as needed on the meeting platform, as well as it's on the screen on site, I believe. With this, I welcome our speakers. Dr. Nirmita Narasimhan is a founding member of the research organization Center for Internet and Society, where she has built the Accessibility and Inclusion Program on digital accessibility. Nirmita is also an expert in policymaking for multi-stakeholder groups and digital inclusion for persons with disabilities. She has served on the government committee to draft the national policy on universal electronics accessibility, the committee to revise the guidelines for Indian government websites, and has also been involved in drafting of key ICT accessibility policies for the Indian government and other countries. Welcome, Nirmita. Abia Akram from Pakistan is the founder of the National Forum of Women with Disabilities and a leading figure in the disability rights movement in Pakistan and the Asia Pacific. Abia was named one of the BBC's 100 Women in 2021 and is a founding member and coordinator of the Special Talent Exchange Program and the Asia Pacific Women with Disabilities United. Abia chairs the UNICEF Global Partnership for Children with Disabilities and the Women's Coordinator of Disabled Peoples International in the Asia Pacific, and was the first woman from Pakistan and the first woman with disability to be nominated to Commonwealth Young Disabled Peoples Forum's coordinator. Welcome, Abia. Our next speaker is Vashkar Bhattacharjee. Vashkar is a person with visual disability and serves as the National Accessibility Consultant for the A2I program of the ICT division of the Bangladesh government. Vashkar works to foster the development of ideas that empower people with disabilities and are later scaled up and made accessible to everyone. His current priority is creating an inclusive university at the University of Chittagong, and he brings deep experience in the intersections of digital accessibility and disability rights and justice. Welcome, Vashkar. I'm pleased to have with us also Srinidhi Raghavan from Rising Flame India. Srinidhi is a disabled feminist writer, researcher, and educator, and works at the intersections of sexuality, gender, disability, and technology. Srinidhi co-leads programs at Rising Flame, and her work focuses on deepening conversations around sexuality, on rights of persons with disabilities, and building more spaces where disabled people can thrive. Welcome, Srinidhi. Our moderator today is Gunilla Aspring. Gunilla has been active in the disability policy programs and research for 30 years and is the chair of the Internet Society's Accessibility Standing Group, initiating a project on disability leadership training in internet governance and digital rights. Gunilla is a member of the APrIGF MSG and has served on the UN's Internet Governance Forum Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, and is also the vice chair of ICANN's Asia Pacific Regional At-Large Organization. Thank you everyone for joining us, and over to you, Gunilla, to take the conversation ahead.
Thank you very much, Debarati. And again, thank you for the panelists. I wish you were sitting next to me here, but I think we're doing really well remotely too. So we have some good questions, and what I'll do is direct the questions initially to one of the panelists, and then ask if there were any additional comments, and I'll go through each of the panelists, and then we'll finish off with a question that I'm very keen to hear from all of you. So the first question relates to what would you like to share when it comes to experiences and anecdotes on what it means to have autonomy and choice over one's digital self? How does this resonate with disability rights and justice? So I'll ask Srinidhi to start the ball rolling, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you, Srinidhi.
Thank you so much, Gunilla. I think when we think about autonomy, choice, and agency, I think they're all integral parts of disability rights and justice, right? And so when it extends to the digital self, in many ways, it is the same as I mean, these ideas remain the same, whether it is in the digital space or in the physical space, you know. And I think one of the things when we think about disability rights and justice with regards to persons with disabilities in particular, I think thinking about ownership of digital devices, of being able to access online spaces in many different in many different ways, and having the sort of choice of using and experiencing digital spaces like non-disabled people would experience it, without having to wonder or consider about whether it is accessible, whether the information is catered to them, whether this is, I mean, without having to juggle through multiple what ifs or what are the possibilities. I think it would be so, in many ways, autonomy, choice, and agency is an integral part of disability rights and justice. So definitely needs to be present in many ways in the digital space as well. And because the digital space is in so many ways connected to our physical space, and it is not just an isolated experience, it's connected to our mobility, to financial independence, to increase in access to information. And in many ways, these variety of how we experience the world is connected to our digital self. It becomes more important than ever that autonomy and agency are possibilities for disabled folks.
Thank you. Some very important points there. Disability rights exist everywhere. And I wondered if any of the other panelists wanted to make a comment on that before we move on to the next question.
If you allow me, Gunilla, my name is Bhaskar Bhattacharjee.
Please go ahead, Bhaskar.
I just would like to stress four very important points, like in this aspect. One is that accessibility for people with disabilities. We always talking about that, and we sometimes forgot there is beyond accessibility rights exist for people with disabilities. Whenever we talked about the digitalization, then we always talked about accessibility, which are very important, which really restrict us to access digital technology. Secondly, I would like to stress about the awareness. People with disabilities are not really aware regarding their rights in the digital space. That's another bigger challenge for us to aware the people with disabilities. Even they are not talking about the digital inclusion and zero digital divide related issues. OPDs and Organization of Persons with Disabilities are sometimes reluctant in our region regarding these issues. Third point is that affordability. People with disabilities always live in under the poverty line, so they don't able to afford the technology such as a smartphone, computer, or any other devices. Lastly, the connectivity. Again, there's issues of cost and also the devices. Connectivity, as we don't have connectivity, then how we can get the autonomy in the digital space or self-determination is a secondary part. Lastly, people with disabilities has a diverse types of needs, and we sometimes forgot about the most vulnerable groups such as neurodevelopment disabilities, women with disabilities, multiple disabilities. That's really important to discuss and bring these issues in the front line. I'm not sure how much discussion is going around us in the APrIGF regarding these vulnerable communities. Thank you, Gunilla.
Thank you very much, Bhaskar. And Abia, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you so much for in having us in this important discussion today. And we all know, like, it's a huge digital divide that exists in the global south, and particularly if you talk about the Asia Pacific region, that we have seen that mostly digital access, people called it as a luxury, but for persons with disabilities, it's a need. And how we making sure that this digital divide can bridge that gap. And secondly, when you talk about the choice, autonomy, and your justice to the digital life, that is a huge question again. Because if you provide them the accessibility, there is no like further access to the security, how we are collecting the data on the digitalized world. And again, it's a long debate for women and girls with disabilities on their personal choice, because we are going to a very like complicated kind of processes where we are training them how to use the digital technology, how to access to those services which are accessible for them. And at the same time, we are telling them like it's important to talk about the serious kind of issues of the gender-based violence or all those kind of like access to services. So where that this gap and the choice and autonomy, this needs to be addressed in a systematic way, and that we will share further in the conversation. Like there are a few stories from the regional perspective as well, where we can connect this and can share. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. There are so many points to ponder when it comes to the various gaps we have and how to meet those. And actually, the next question is for you, Avia, in regard to in your work, how have you engaged with the issue of accessibility and holistic digital experiences for persons with diverse disabilities? Could be physical, it could be psychosocial, and many others. So could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, thank you. I would say again, like it's a 10 to 15% of the total population are person with disability. 50% of them are women and girls with disability. Again, the challenge, like more than 80% are from the rural areas where they have very limited access to the internet. So when just recently, I could share one example of the COVID. Like after the COVID, it was extremely difficult to reach out to those persons with disabilities. Without technology, it was not possible. So what we did, like we conducted the survey, we reach out to the families who have even access to a smaller smartphone, and we can just talk to those women and girls with disability. We provided them the psychosocial support online and linked them with the service providers like police department, medical, legal, all those systems who are responsive to the needs of women and girls with disability. The difficult part was to reach out to the psychosocial support workers, to all those women and girls with disabilities who were not having access to the internet. And that was the point where we just like started some training, some government response on that, some advocacy we have done. So it was like kind of a parallel approach to bring the systematic change in the policies, in the legislation, and at the same time creating that safe space, digitalized safe space for women and girls with disability. So we generated all the ethical guidelines where if you're using the data or the internet or access to the digitalized services, you have to keep that certain ethical guidelines in your processes to secure the data of those who are responding online calls and all. Secondly, just recently, another example, like in the flood response, we had a huge disaster in Pakistan. And that was again a like problem to reach out to those persons with disabilities who lost their assistive devices, who lost their services. So we provided them the access again to the like digitalized world technology. We used that, and we like provided the mobile application, which was like easy to just notify where they are, or if they have any kind of like resources, then we can reach out to them and rescue those persons with disabilities who were sitting on the rooftop of the house, because that was the only place they can reach when they have to inform the families, and also there's somebody put them on the rooftop. So these kind of like support system, we can use the technology in a very productive way, but again it's a question question of the safety, it's a question of the access and affordability. As my colleague have already mentioned, it's about allocations of the budget, because if you don't have the specific budgetary allocation from the finance ministry, from the government, from the state, then you cannot use properly the utilization of the technology. And we are coming to the next point of the artificial intelligence as well. So that will come in a further discussion, I think, that how these services can change the whole life of persons with disability. Thank you.
Thank you. There are so many important points there that's covered. And I just wanted to reference a previous session to this one about a new tool in Sri Lanka. Well, it's been developed for a few years, called Be Safe for women with disabilities. And one of the, and that's linking with a lot of government services, protection if someone has feels harassed. It's also in regard to disaster preparedness and support. But the funding is running out. There's need for more funding for tech support and to develop it further. So there's always this issue. So I'm going to continue and with the next question for Nirmita, and this is about our digital footprints growing. And as part of that, a person's data is an extension of themselves. And in the digital space, what does this mean for persons with disability? What are some privacy?
Audio now unmuted alert. Space. Mute.
And some data and some database concerns. And Nimita, if you have any strategies to respond to this, would be great. And any particular experiences or stories in your community, we would love to hear them.
Sure. So I think we have concerns regarding, when we are unable to access technologies or content. I think that is when concerns emerge, right? And that could be because of various reasons. Usually, a lot of the times it's because of inaccessibility. When we are unable to access websites or applications, we're unable to access technologies. And that is one reason straight away when we have concerns. There are also the other situations when we are, finding language really complex, or we are not given choices. For example, you click on a box appears, and
has joined the meeting alert.
If you do not want to agree, but you do not find the button using a screen reader, say, no, I don't want to agree, I just want to continue. And sometimes that option is not available for a screen reader user. It just says, I agree or continue button. And a lot of times the license terms or privacy terms, they're not easily understandable to people. Maybe people do not understand English so well, or the language is really complex. So there are just so many reasons, and why it could be problematic. For example, in India, one time when I find it really difficult is with digital payments, and we have a card machine now which is completely touch screen, and I'm not able to input the PIN. So every time I either need to have India is becoming completely digital currency. We don't have even notes, so it's very less. So these kind of situations come when we have concerns. Strategies, I would say, of course, we have to implement accessibility everywhere, and that would eliminate some of challenges. Concerted effort to ensure that language is simple, people have an option, an alternate method of accessing things. They are made aware of what they're accessing and how to exercise their choices. I think more people with disabilities who are involved in advising or guiding, consumer, services or digital services and products. I think that would really help to improve services and increase the number of people who are able to access technologies and content on the internet. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any
wanted to
other
add-
Yes, Srinidhi, did you want to
Yeah.
make a comment?
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. I just wanted to add to what Nirmita was saying. I think also that some of the concerns of some of the offline concerns that exist around privacy and around privacy also replicate themselves online, right? So if the situation is inaccessible, then like Nirmita was sharing about the payment machine, it means you have to give your PIN out to somebody else in order for the PIN to be used and for you to use money in your bank account, right? So in many ways, this allows for many violations that happen, right? Like even if you look at all the two-factor authentications that happen with many websites when you get locked out, etc. Often the OTP comes for like 10 seconds or 15 seconds, and you have to input that by the time it finishes. So our very understanding of privacy is and protection and safety and security is seen from a non-disabled lens, right? So you need to enter an OTP in 15 seconds. That's not necessarily a space at which the screen reader can go from one application to another. Then you have to have somebody else input the OTP for you, right? So these many ways in which privacy is violated by accessibility being violated. Right. And I think that because of the very real concerns around inaccess that exists around many digital platforms and spaces, we aren't often talking about the data-based concerns in the disability community. We're not thinking about what happens to all the, recently I saw some news about how the auto captions is being used to generate better, is being used by Zoom within Otter, right? And we all use auto captions because it makes it more accessible, right? But we're not having that conversation because it's not a possibility for us to say, oh, we will not use auto captions, right? Because for many people in the global south, having access to captioners who are physically present is often very difficult to do. It's too expensive. So we use auto captions as a way to make our rooms accessible. But in many ways, we aren't talking about what is the privacy violation there that we don't know about, or that we aren't asking the questions because it's a need for us that we cannot dismiss, right? So I think the data and privacy concerns often take a secondary step because we are so focused on bringing disabled people to the table, bringing access to disabled people, having them use these technologies to benefit from these technologies, etc.
So I just had one more thing to add, if I may. I think the question is not just so simple as, what works or doesn't work for everyone. So while you do not want to give out data, you have concerns. At the same time, for some people, it may work to have your preferences recorded to ensure that you get services, right? So it's not, I think it's more about, it's not a one size fits all. Some people, like I said, so it has to be some kind of customized, or there should be some option for people to be able to exercise what they want. Some people would like people to know, okay, I'm entering with a screen reader and automatically, I should have screen reader enabled, say kind of a website, and some people may not want to give out that information. So I just think it's not so straightforward to answer.
Everyone is an individual. I think it just comes down to that, and that everyone needs to have the choice to use technology in the way that best suits them. Any other comments about this before we move on to the next question? Thank you, Dr. Shabir, but we're going to take questions from the audience later. So I'll just stick with the panel for now. And Abhiyar and Bhaskar, do you have any further comments about this particular aspect?
I was just thinking, what is the meaning of UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities? What is the meaning of UN Disability Inclusion Strategy? What is the meaning of Marrakesh VIP Treaty? If people with disabilities are not really enjoy their rights equal basis with others, who can answer us? Who will take the responsibility? A state party like our region or many other countries are reluctant to implement this global commitment. Hence, people with disabilities really excluded and create huge digital divide. And we are losing our autonomy, choice, and freedom. That's my comment.
Yes, and we have to make sure that whatever happens, that that doesn't occur. Abia, any comments about this question?
Just quickly on that, like we also see that data, and I completely agree with my fellow panelists, like this is about your autonomy. But again, like when we talk about the electoral reforms and the processes, like the choice of casting the vote, and all those are not possible without access to the digitalized world. And then the same time, when we talk about the data and the segregation of the data, that helps a lot. But again, when we were having the census and all, I'll talk more about the Asia Pacific region, or many of the countries were facing the same challenge, like in collecting the data and like dividing in the desegregation of the data. Is that's really hard to provide that kind of like access to the resources and for the using of that data. The protection as a human right defenders as well, that's very important. Like when we talk about the our rights, our demands on the world, we are using technology as a tool for advocacy in like most of the platforms, social media platform, digitalized program. And then we feel like it's really like giving us the threats, it's giving us more responsibility to keep the protection of the organization, protection of our demands, and then on the network. So these are the things which are coming up as a safe and providing that kind of space for them.
All right, we're actually going to move to something positive and where we can use our imaginations. So I'm going to ask Bhaskar for a start. So what is your imagination of digital tech that works for all? Can you share any examples of digital tech and innovation that provides accessible, safe, joyful user experience? Things that are great and fun. And then say, what are some of the limitations in building and implementing these technologies? But let's look at how we can really enjoy technology and dream and have something exciting to look forward to. Bhaskar.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. Very nice questions. I would like to share one of my personal experience. Since my educational journey, I never ever got an accessible book, even not in schools, college, or university. Just listen some audio. My mother read for me, my father read for me, my friends and teachers help me just listening the books. When my daughter was in grade 1 and she can see, she always came to me and asked me to read her book. I really failed to read because I can't see. And she didn't really realize that her father is blind, he cannot read book. In the time, I thought, could I innovate something which is accessible for all, including my daughters and any other parents, students of blindness and other disabilities. Since then, we can bring this idea to the Service Innovation Fund of the A2I. It's called a special program. In that time, it was a Prime Minister Office program. And we have given an idea. It's called Multimedia Talking Book. The book can be seen by eye, listened by ear, read by finger. So that book was really a design, a model of universal design. Everybody can read that book without any barrier. And after awarding this book, I was really excited. My daughter can read books by seeing. I can teach her by listening. and any other parents of disability can read this book, listening, seeing, or touching by braille. Even deafblind people can use this book by using braille display. And this book can be played by a very minimum cost of player, like $2 MP3 player, a smartphone, tab, computer, whatever device people have, they can use this book. And nowadays, government has scaled up these books, and National Textbook Board, they are providing multimedia talking book freely to the all students, including students with disabilities. So this is the best example from Bangladesh. And UNESCO has published a case study on these books in 2021. 2021, yes, how these books are more useful during COVID, because people were unable to carry their printed books in their home because they didn't know that there will be huge lockdown. So these digital books, multimedia talking books, became very popular among the students with disabilities. So that's one of the examples for Bangladesh. I hope people are enjoying reading, and they have an now option to a book in a alternative format. Thank you.
Yes, a wonderful example, a family example. And please, the rest of the group and the panel, do you have any dreams about technology that is enjoyable to use and that we can have in the future?
Yeah. Just quickly to share, because this is really interesting. We also feel the same, like for a person with disabilities, using technology is a dream, already a dream to have access. And they are just like feeling, if we have the availability in the rural areas, in the many of the local areas, then they can bring the huge change in the society. One of the example, like when we given the access to the young people with disabilities to the technology, they were easily finding it very easy to get the livelihood opportunities. We talk with the corporate sector, we work with them closely to make their websites accessible and opening those startups online, those applications, mobile applications. And we did an award with the Pakistan Telecommunication Authorities, where they have given a smaller award to the young people, university students, to create that accessible mobile application so that could be used by many of the persons with disabilities. So they were coming up with the excellent ideas of sharing that technology, like with one of them was the sign language interpretation that could be available 24/7 in the mobile. So if you are going to the hospital and the doctor cannot sign, then you can just link and the interpreter will come online and they can talk and explain to the doctor, and then you can easily access. Same was for the hospitals, for police stations, for all those departments, and even in the public places, wherever they go, they just talk to the interpretation is available. Secondly, as I mentioned, like with the corporate sectors, when we changed their systems and made that accessible for young people with disabilities, so they were finding it very useful to get access to the opportunities, to the employments, and then they can, get that job opportunities as well. And now they are sitting in a managerial positions because they made that happen, like by talking to them, by discussing that. And thirdly, just an example of the psychosocial support worker, which I have mentioned. Now it's changing the systems of the government, because government have their own helplines to respond to the needs of the survivors of the gender-based violence or women overall. So we are making their helplines accessible, more responsive to the needs of person with disabilities. And in that way, we are expanding the reach out. I know it took us very long to reach that point, because we have to change the whole strategically, talk to them, policy dialogues we have conducted, consultations with them. We developed the tools to review their accessibility audits of the government provision of the services, the helplines. but it is creating a change. And I feel like we can see these examples as Vaskar have already shared, that we need to develop these think tank and share that more extensively. And I think this is an excellent platform today where we are all sharing our knowledge, but this will give us more opportunities. And now the SDG Summit is coming up. It's a halfway of reaching to the Sustainable Development Goals. So how we address this at this point to make our strategies for the advocacy of access to the digitalized world, access to technology, access to the safe and justified technology. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yes. And certainly sharing ideas and stories, and then how we can work together to make change. That's what we're here for. And Srinidhi, would you like to follow up on this about imagining innovative, enjoyable technologies that we can use?
Thank you. I think I was thinking of more everyday technologies that enhance our lives, even this platform that's making it possible for us to be here. But I think like pre-pandemic, though we were a remote working organization, we didn't necessarily have in any ways to spend time co-working, etc. But thanks to all the innovation of the pandemic and things getting better and smoother, so many of us now co-work in the digital space, right? Because we are located in different parts of the world, but it's possible for us to, and I think that there is something joyful about silently working in a digital space with somebody who might be elsewhere in their own house, but remotely to work together and to sort of create a virtual environment for all the people involved. I think that's something that I feel has been a good innovation that has allowed for joyful experiences. I think in general, one of the things that I was thinking about while others were speaking is also how a lot of innovation that has been made for, say, persons with disabilities, or making our lives easier and more accessible, etc. There's multimedia books, and how many other students are also benefiting from them because they find it more engaging, etc. So innovation doesn't always have to be restrictedly used only by the community that it was meant for, and that I think helps us to further imagine other technologies and innovations that will benefit more people. Yeah.
Well, before I pass on to Nimita, I can't resist mentioning that about 25, 30 years ago, there was a very expensive program that cost probably $10,000 for persons with mobility impairments that couldn't use a keyboard. And so it was basically speech to text. And that was designed for persons with disability. And now it's mainstream, everyone uses it. So the disability community and the research community involved with that is very innovative in itself. And these are products that can be eventually used by everyone and become mainstream, mass market. And like we heard about the multimedia talking book. Yes, I think a lot of people would enjoy that. So Nimita, imagine what wonderful technology you would like to see.
So if we're talking about technology for all, it has to be something with multiple ways of communication on both sides, input and output. you have to have the choice to customize it the way you want. I would really like to see a technology which completely overcomes accessibility issues, regardless of how people are designing and developing websites. It doesn't matter. For example, a really small feature of in an iPhone, people keep sending you image files. And now it doesn't really matter because, VoiceOver just describes what is there. So it doesn't matter if other people are creating inaccessible. So until the time that we are able to raise awareness, that is a separate thing we need to do. But we are not limited by other people's failure to conform to accessibility standards. Maybe a lot of people are isolated because of the way they communicate or where they live or how they are. So maybe a kind of technology which has AI and is interactive. The technology probably, which is a one-stop shop. Say I get a medicine delivery and I just point it and it reads out what's there. Yeah, but my concerns also would be that the more you would like to use AI, which you should, it's also a little scary about thinking, if you think about how much AI can kind of take over or catalog your choices and your preferences. So that would be an area where we would need to achieve a balance.
Right. Yes, I like this about we are not limited by others' failures. I like that a lot. So the last question, and before we go to the wider audience, and I'd like just very brief interventions by the panel. And that is, what are some recommendations, policy or otherwise, to create a world where self-determination, accessibility, autonomy for persons with disabilities seem possible and realistic in digital context? Now, we've touched on that in a number of ways, but maybe look at it in the policy context. So if we could just have maybe a minute and a half for each person. Vashka, would you like to start off, please?
Hopefully you can listen me. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Firstly, we'd like to inform the audience, whenever we unmute ourselves or use, you are getting some noise that is called screen reading software. I believe Zoom will solve this problem because screen reading software is our eye. Sometimes this noise might be not comfortable, many of you. By today's webinar, I am asking the corporates like Zoom authorities, please ensure that the screen reading voice must not go outside of the device which we are using. This is one. Secondly, policy is very important. We have a global policy such as UNCRPD, UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. We have Marrakesh Treaty for visual blind and visual impaired. So this is very, very important international commitments. And secondly, we have a national level laws and policies, such as many countries, including Bangladesh, have a web accessibility policies. We have a Persons with Disability Rights and Protection Act 2013. We have Neurodevelopment Trust Act. So there is law based on the global policy. Many countries have a local laws. And lastly, the challenge is the implementation. I think in current world, we have enough policy, but the implementation of the policy is almost in 10 to 15%, I can tell you. Because of the lack of implementation of the policies, lack of commitment by the agencies, including UN agencies, I always blame them because these people are creating policies, but they're not really implementing by themselves. This is very important. So policy is there, implementation is very, very poor. Loss is there. If some citizen, if they don't get their rights described in the law, they got the justice. People with disabilities are not getting justice because they are unable to go to the justice system. The justice systems are not accessible for them. That's why policy is enough policies are there. Now we need the implementation to ensure equal rights for all, including people with disabilities. Thank you.
Yes, implementation. And I think that's a key. And now we are getting tight on time. So are there any additional comments about that particular question about how we move forwards? If not, I'll open it up to the floor.
I think I only had one comment to make. I think that in the last few years, we are seeing more and more disabled people online and on social media and speaking about their concerns, etc. I think one of the things would be interesting for others to also begin to follow the conversations that are happening, to sort of have them in your timelines and in your feeds, right? So that we can learn from experiences already being shared online, which makes it more possible for us to see disabled people as whole, as users of technology, as consumers, etc. So I think that would be something that is not a recommendation as such, but as something that would help us build a more inclusive world.
Indeed. Any other comments?
Now unmuted alert.
Just one thing, I agree with Bhaskar and Srinidhi. I agree that we need implementation. So I just like to add a couple of more keywords of mainstreaming. We should increasingly view accessibility across the entire spectrum of policymaking and prioritization. So these two things are, I feel, lacking. And I would like to add that to the recommendations.
Thank you. And Abia, you have a last word
Yes.
at this.
No, thank you. I think it's better like we can receive the comments and the questions from the floor and then we can respond. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thank you. All right. We had before a question from Dr. Shabir. And while he is asking his question, if anyone else in the room or online has a question or a comment, please put up either your virtual hand or your physical hand. I'll hand over to Dr. Shabir to make a comment, please. And Mike, Jen, would you be able to do the mic? Is there another mic?
Thank you. Thank you, Gunilla. Thank you very much, Bhaskar and other lady speakers who have been talking to. I don't actually have a question, but a comment, rather a response to a comment that one of the speakers made. I don't remember exactly the name, so please pardon you. So the response was, the point was in terms of making and enabling person with disabilities, bringing them to the table, we are somehow compromising other privacy and security concerns. I would respond to this particular aspect, but before I do that, I would also want to point out here that in the name of security, we are also neglecting the needs of person with disabilities. And that is not necessarily due to the lack of the technology or options, but mainly due to the lack of awareness. The one example would be the human testing of using CAPTCHA options in response to filling out some forms. There are multiple options available, but people and organizations still use human CAPTCHAs for testing that whether it is a bot or human accessing their system. While they do that, they forget to give alternate options for people with vision impairment. And this enables them, this leaves them out of their system just because that was not made accessible. There are other options such as audio questions and sometimes some of the websites that require them to enable cookies. While that that could cause other security concerns that I would not go into, but still those cookies, they require that if you want accessibility, you have to enable our cookie into your own system. With regards to the point that was made that while trying to make people with disabilities bring to the table, we are compromising. That's not necessarily because of the requirements of bringing people with disabilities on the table, but mainly due to the lack of the awareness. For instance, human captioning, Zoom captioning is an option which could be used or could not be used. As we use recording and we inform the people and give the consent of the audience, of the participants, that this call maybe is being recorded and you have the option to join or leave. Similarly, the options could be given. This is mainly due to the lack of the awareness on part of different people, and also not talking to the relevant people with disabilities that what could be the options there. Certainly, I know there is a very large community of people with disabilities, particularly hard of hearing, who hate this AI-generated auto captioning. As a person with vision impairment myself, I also have experienced some of the auto captions to the images that people have started using in their presentations and email pictures that they send to others. And I can testify to the fact that very funny captions are being generated. Without going into that discussion, I would just say that people need to talk to the person with disabilities. As I said yesterday, often quoted statement, nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we want to take that question as well?
Hi, my name is Bikalpa. I just have a quick comment as well. I think, as one of the speakers pointed out, one of the main issues with policy with people with disabilities is that sometimes I feel like it's not prioritized as much as it should have. As a person with disability, I'd like to thank and congratulate you all for your persistent efforts to making this an issue. One of the things that many other people forget that is, living with disability, it not only affects, it's not a matter of choice. It's not something that, I would wish, but it is something that I would actually need. And I think that should be enough to justify the amount of policy consideration that is needed. And by that, I mean, it should be able to put this issue in one of the top policy priorities. But then when we're talking about policy priorities, I hear a lot of projects, but then disability comes at the bottom of the many projects. So I'm just wondering if there's any solution to this or how this can be solved. Thank you.
That's such a good question, and I wish there was a very good answer. We have 1 minute left, and that sort of discussion we can have afterwards. But we need to continue. We need to continue raising these issues in plenary sessions, in any fora that we can. And for example, Dr. Shabir was in the opening plenary of APrIGF, and that's the sort of thing to have that impact, and we need to keep on doing that. So that's my personal thoughts, and so I need to now wrap up and say thank you very much to the panelists, and especially to Debarati Das of Point of View, who initiated this workshop session. I think it has created some very interesting and innovative thinking that we need to take away from this room and continue talking about, sharing with others, presenting it at other fora, and creating projects out of it and making a difference. So, Debarati, would you like to just say a few final words before we wrap up?
Thank you so much, speakers, for sharing your reflections. It's been an enriching conversation. And there's really so many things to consider, like when we talk about accessibility, thinking about the use aspect of technologies, and also like going beyond that and thinking about agency, choice, privacy in digital tech, and what these can mean in so many diverse contexts. So thank you very much. And many thanks to Gunela for holding this space so beautifully. And thank you, my colleague Shazia as well, for documenting the session, and everybody in the audience for participating. We hope to catch you in other sessions as well.
Audio now unmuted alert. Space. Mute. Current.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
See
Thank
you
you.
again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all the panelists and Debarati again, and Point of View staff, and the audience here in the room and online. And we'll finish off there, but that doesn't mean we finish a conversation. We keep the ideas going. Thank you. I turned it off.